The envelope had been sitting on my kitchen counter for 3 days before I finally opened it. I kept walking past it. Every morning when I made coffee, every night when I came home from my shift at the hospital, I'd glance at it, then look away. There was something about the return address, my uncle's attorney's office in Savannah, that made my stomach tighten in a way I couldn't quite explain. My Uncle Preston had passed 6 weeks earlier. A stroke, quick and quiet, the way he'd always lived. And somewhere in that envelope was the answer to a question I'd been carrying for most of my adult life. But I wasn't ready yet, so I let it sit. I want to tell you something before I get into this. Before I get into everything that happened after. Tell me in the comments, what's the most important thing someone in your family ever tried to take from you? Not a thing. Not money. I mean something that mattered. I want to know, because what happened to me has everything to do with that question. My name is Evelyn. I'm 34 years old. I work nights in the pediatric unit at a hospital outside of Charleston, South Carolina. I drive a 12-year-old Honda that needs new brake pads. I rent a 2-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood that floods every time a hurricane curves too close to the coast. I am, by most measures, a woman who has built something small and decent out of very little, and I almost lost all of it over a house I never even wanted. Let me back up. My mother raised me alone from the time I was 7. My father left. I won't spend time on that. And it was just the two of us in a rented house on the east side of Savannah, a narrow white clapboard place with a broken gutter that knocked against the side of the house every time it rained. Mama worked double shifts at a grocery store. She ironed other people's clothes on Sunday afternoons for extra money. She was the most capable person I have ever known, and she never once let me see her cry about it. Her brother, my Uncle Preston, was the opposite. He'd made money in real estate in the 90s. The kind of money that comes easy to people who buy cheap and sell smart, and by the time I was a teenager, he was living in a 4-bedroom colonial, in a gated community on the south side of Savannah with a truck, a boat, and opinions about everyone's choices. He was not unkind exactly. He was just certain he'd figured something out that the rest of us hadn't. He tolerated my mother. He was generous in the way people are generous when they want credit for it. A check at Christmas, a contribution toward my college application fees, a comment at every family gathering about how Mama could have done better for herself if she'd listened. She never argued with him. She'd just nod and change the subject, and later, driving home, she'd say to me, "Some people need to be the smartest person in every room, baby. You just smile and let them have it." I listened to my mother. For most of my life, I smiled and let Preston have it. That changed the year I was 26. My mother was diagnosed with early-stage breast cancer in February. The treatment was expensive, not catastrophic, but expensive enough to matter when you're living on a nurse's salary, and your mother's part-time wages from the fabric store she'd started working at, after the grocery store closed. We managed. We did what families do. We rearranged. I picked up extra shifts. Mama cut back on everything that wasn't essential. We were okay. What I didn't know was that my mother had gone to Preston for help. I found out because he told me. Not gently, not privately. At Easter dinner, with 8 people at the table, he looked at me across the bread rolls and sweet tea and said, "I helped your mama out while she was sick. I hope you appreciate that. Some of inch more than our share." I remember putting my fork down, very carefully. I remember the sound of the ceiling fan above us. I said, "I didn't know that, thank you." He nodded like I'd confirmed something he already believed about himself. What I found out later, after dinner, when my mother and I were washing dishes alone in his kitchen, was the full story. He had given her money, $12,000, which covered 2 rounds of treatment, but he'd made her sign a document, a promissory note. She was to repay him with 4% interest within 5 years. My mother, his sister, while she had cancer. She told me the way she told me everything difficult, quietly, matter-of-factly, her hands still moving in the soapy water. She said, "He needed it in writing, that's just how he is." I stood there for a long time not saying anything. I dried the dishes. I hugged my mother goodnight. I drove home. And I thought about that promissory note for the next 8 years. My mother repaid him. Every cent plus interest. It took her 4 years. She never mentioned it again. Preston never mentioned it either, except once. A passing comment at a birthday party about how people always find the money when they're motivated. No one else at the party knew what he meant. My mother smiled. I smiled. That was the last time I smiled at one of his comments. Preston never married. He had a son, my cousin Trevor, from a relationship in his 30s that ended badly, and Trevor had moved to Portland years ago and made it clear in the way people make things clear without saying them directly, that he had no interest in his father's life or his father's money. They spoke at holidays, That was it. Which meant that when Preston started getting older, and the house needed work, and the paperwork for his properties needed managing, he started calling me. I don't know exactly when I became the person he called. It happened gradually, the way these things do. First it was just a favor here and there. Could I pick up a prescription? Could I help him understand his Medicare supplemental paperwork? Could I come look at a leak in the basement because he didn't trust the contractor's estimate? I did these things. I told myself I was doing them because he was family, and because my mother had taught me that family showed up even when it was inconvenient. But if I'm honest, and I'm trying to be honest with you, that's the whole point of me telling you this. Part of me was also doing it because I thought it meant something. That I was building something, that he saw me. I should have known better. 3 years before he died, Preston sat me down at his kitchen table and told me he was planning to leave me the house. Not Trevor. Me. He said Trevor had made his choices. He said I was the one who'd shown up. He slid a piece of paper across the table. Not a legal document, just a handwritten note, almost like a letter, that said he intended to update his will to reflect this. He asked me to sign at the bottom to acknowledge I'd been told. I signed it. I cried on the way home, not from grief or gratitude. I couldn't have named what I felt exactly. Something complicated. Something that had my mother's face in it, and that kitchen sink, and $12,000 and 4% interest. For 3 years I kept showing up. I mowed his lawn twice a month when his back got bad. I drove him to his cardiologist appointments and sat in the waiting room reading old magazines. I organized his filing cabinet, 4 decades of property records, tax documents, insurance policies, because he said it helped him feel less overwhelmed. I did all of it without complaint. And then, 4 months before he died, something changed. I noticed it at Thanksgiving. There was a woman there I hadn't met before. A friend of his, he said, named Beverly, who'd moved into the neighborhood the previous spring. She was maybe 60, warm in a practiced way, attentive in the way people are attentive when they're paying close attention. She laughed at everything Preston said. She called him Prez. She helped with the dishes without being asked. I thought nothing of it. 2 months later, Preston called me and told me he was revising his will. He said it casually. Like he was telling me about a weather forecast. He said he'd been thinking, and he felt that Trevor deserved another chance, and that he wanted to divide things more fairly. He said the house would go to a trust he was setting up. He said Beverly had introduced him to her estate attorney. I didn't say anything for a moment. Then I asked, what about what you told me? He said, I didn't make any promises, Evelyn. I told you my intentions at the time. Intentions change. He said it kindly. That was what got me. The kindness in his voice, like he was doing me a favor by being clear about it. I said, okay. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't say anything else. I told him I hoped he felt better about his decision, and I said goodbye and I hung up. Then I sat on my bathroom floor for about 45 minutes. I want to be careful here, because I don't want you to think this was purely about the money or the house. The house was worth maybe $380,000 by then. Savannah real estate had appreciated dramatically in those years. That's just the market. And yes, that would have changed my life significantly. But that's not actually what broke something in me that night. What broke something in me was the promissory note. The image of my mother at that kitchen sink. The 4% interest. The 8 years I'd spent showing up for a man who treated generosity like a transaction. And connection like a ledger. And I had walked right into the same pattern she had, because I thought I was different. Thought I'd earned something different. Thought, if I just kept showing up eventually, he would see me as a person he loved rather than a person he was managing. I was 33 years old and I was still trying to earn it. That night, I made a decision. I went to my desk and I found the piece of paper he'd had me sign 3 years earlier. The handwritten note. I photographed it. I sent the photograph to my own email. And then I called an attorney. Not to fight him. I want to be clear about that. I wasn't planning to contest the will or threaten litigation or any of that. I just wanted to understand what I had. What, if anything, that signed document meant, whether it was enforceable, whether there was a conversation worth having with an attorney present. The answer, as it turned out, was complicated. The note I'd signed wasn't a formal contract. It wasn't a codicil to his will. In most circumstances, it wouldn't be enforceable on its own. But my attorney, a woman named Patricia who specialized in estate disputes and did not waste words, told me there were circumstances under which it could become relevant. That it could be used as evidence of intent if there were other factors suggesting undue influence on the final will. Beverly, she said, raising an eyebrow slightly. Tell me more about Beverly. I told her what I knew. Which wasn't much, but it was a start. Over the next 2 months, I did something I'm not entirely proud of, but I'm not entirely ashamed of either. I paid attention. I asked Preston careful questions during our phone calls. We were still talking, though I'd stopped driving to Savannah, telling him my schedule had gotten complicated, which was true. I listened. I asked about Beverly in the way you ask about things you want information about, without seeming like you want information about them. And gradually a picture emerged. Beverly had moved to Savannah from Atlanta 18 months earlier. She and Preston had become close very quickly. Within 3 months of meeting him, she was at his house 4 or 5 days a week. Within 6 months, according to Preston himself in a moment of unguarded conversation, she had strong opinions about his estate plan. She thought Trevor deserved more. She thought Preston had been taken advantage of by people who'd shown up only when it was convenient for them. I thought about the $12,000. The promissory note. My mother at the sink. I thought about 240 mowing sessions and 4 years of cardiology waiting rooms. I didn't say any of that to Preston. I just kept listening. Then he got sick fast, the way cardiac events go fast in men his age who've been ignoring their blood pressure for 20 years. A massive stroke in the 3rd week of October. He was in the hospital for 11 days. He died on a Tuesday morning, and I drove up to Savannah that afternoon and sat with the funeral home director and helped make arrangements because there was no one else to do it, and Beverly did not appear. And Trevor flew in from Portland and shook my hand at the graveside service and flew back the next morning. And then I went home and I waited, and the envelope arrived. I left it on the counter for 3 days, the way I told you. On the 4th morning I made my coffee and I sat down at the kitchen table and I opened it. The will, as Preston had told me, left the house to a revocable trust, with Beverly listed as the primary beneficiary. There were smaller bequests. Trevor received $40,000 and the contents of the boat storage unit. I received his grandmother's china cabinet, which had been in storage, and $5,000. The china cabinet was worth maybe $800. I read the whole document twice. Then I set it down, and I drank my coffee and I looked out the window at the parking lot of my apartment complex. Then I called Patricia. Here's what I had that Beverly didn't know about. The signed note. 3 years of documented caretaking. I had kept receipts, not because I was planning anything, but because I'm a nurse and record-keeping is how I'm wired. I had pharmacy runs, dated gas receipts from Savannah trips, a folder of text messages from Preston asking me to come down, thanking me for coming, referencing the house, and I had the timeline of Beverly's arrival and the subsequent changes to his estate plan. Patricia filed a challenge to the will on grounds of undue influence. I'm not going to walk you through all the legal details because they're dense, and I only half understand them myself. What I'll tell you is this: it took 7 months. There were depositions. There were letters. Beverly retained her own attorney, a more expensive one, and for a while it seemed like it would become the kind of thing that grinds on for years and costs more than anything you're fighting for. But Beverly was not, it turned out, prepared for what discovery would uncover about her financial history. She had done something similar before. Not identically but similarly, an elderly neighbor in Atlanta, a changed estate plan, a subsequent legal challenge from adult children. It hadn't gone to court, it had settled, but it existed, it was documented. Her attorney advised her to settle. The settlement took another month to finalize. I'm not going to tell you the exact terms because some of them are confidential. What I can tell you is that the house did not go to Beverly. After legal fees, which were significant, and after Trevor received his share per the original bequest, I received a sum that was considerably more than the $5,000 Preston had left me. I used part of it to pay off my car. The rest is in an investment account. And the house, I don't own it. It was sold as part of the settlement process. I never lived in it. I never wanted to live in it, not really. Savannah is Preston's city. It's not mine anymore. I drove past it once, about a month after everything was finalized. It's a good house, colonial, 4 bedrooms, a proper front porch with those white columns. A young couple has it now. I looked them up on the county property records because I am, as I said, thorough, and they've already painted the shutters green, which is an improvement. I sat in my car in front of it for a long time. I wasn't thinking about money. I wasn't tallying anything up. I was thinking about my mother ironing other people's clothes on a Sunday afternoon while her brother lived in this house. I was thinking about the way Preston used to look at me at family dinners. Assessing, calculating, never just seeing. I was thinking about all the years I'd spent trying to be legible to someone who read people only in terms of what they were worth to him. I was thinking about the fact that I won, and I was still sad. I think that's the thing nobody tells you about situations like this. The ending you fight for isn't always the ending that heals you. I got what I deserved, in the legal sense. Patricia was thorough and persistent, and she is worth every penny. The settlement was fair. By every practical measure, things turned out okay. But I still think about my mother's voice on the phone when she told me about the promissory note. Matter of fact, hands in the soapy water, that's just how he is. She spent her whole life accommodating who he was. I spent 8 years of my adulthood doing the same thing. And the truth is, even when I fought back, I wasn't fighting for the house. I was fighting against the idea that we didn't matter. That everything we gave could just be dismissed, revised, redirected toward whoever came along with the right kind of flattery at the right time. I'm not sure I won that fight. I'm not sure it's winnable. What I know is that I stopped accommodating. That's not nothing. It might even be everything. My mother, when I told her the settlement was done, was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You didn't have to do all that for me, baby." I said, "I know." She said, "Is it enough?" I thought about it for a second. The car, the investment account, the green shutters on a house I drove past once and won't drive past again. I said, "It's enough." And I think mostly I meant it. I never wanted his house. I wanted to be someone he was proud of, which is a different thing entirely. A harder thing, maybe an impossible thing. When the person you're trying to reach has already decided what you're worth, you can fight for what you're owed. I did. I'd do it again. But you can't fight someone into loving you right. That one I had to learn on my own.